you quickly turn the wheel of your car, a drastic weight shift will be felt. The wider the angle and the more momentum you have behind this, the more this force will be felt. Add the car speed to this equation and you will very likely feel in danger. And G-forces will build up to the point where you will feel it, the car will feel it, to the point where the wheels want to start losing traction with the pavement. But, Gonzalo, you might ask, why would I ever want to do such a thing? Wouldn't it be better to slow down a bit and make the turn a bit more smoothly, a bit more, with less danger? In theory, yes, of course. However, sometimes you cannot afford to do things in such a way. In life, often this turn will present itself when it's not convenient at all to take it. And that may come in the form of, jumping into entrepreneurship, a drastic career change, or overall just a change that is very dramatic. You'll likely be going too fast, your car will lose traction for a little bit, and the danger will increase, or at least the perceived danger. That's just how it goes. Now, most people spend their whole lives trying to make everything align perfectly. To try to predict when the turn is going to come, to always going too slow to make sure that the wheels are not going to slide or the danger will not increase too much, always trying to make everything perfect. For better or worse, that's just not how things work. For these opportunities to be presented, these quote-unquote turns or exits, you have to have a certain momentum. To have a certain amount of momentum, you need to be going fast enough that when they arrive, it will feel dangerous. It will happen that moment of, that the wheels want to escape. It is quite the conundrum, yet that's what it is. To be honest with you, this step forward in the right direction, the one you must take, will always feel too risky. You'll never really feel fully prepared that all the stars align, because that's just not how it goes. To a certain extent, to take this turn means to embrace that your wheels will slide for a bit and you will lose control for a little bit. But that part is outside of your control. You can change reality. But what you can do is learn how to drift. And I'm going to be using here the iPad to illustrate a bit better, because what tends to happen with this shift that we're talking about, and I'm going to draw here, this being you from an upside view, this being you, tiny arms. And let's imagine, you're going, you've been making progress, but at some point, we all do, we face an obstacle, some barrier, you feel yourself plateau, and you really feel that doing things the way you've been doing cannot really get you to that next level. Something has to change. However, the first problem is that because we're very stubborn, initially we just try to do more and more and more of the same. And that doesn't work, because it just exhausts ourselves. Perhaps the results increase a little bit, but not the way we want. And so, at some point, we realize that to overcome this wall, we have to find another way. To either crush it or to go around it, however we want to metaphor it around, it needs another way. The problem with this that I experienced in the past, and that's why it was so difficult for me, and perhaps you've experienced it too, is that when you start changing from the same way you've been doing things and implementing a new way, there's a period in the beginning, especially if you don't fully commit to it, where results are worse. Where, perhaps it would be the right way, eventually will get you where you want, but in the beginning, and I'm going to even do here, the results go down. And when that happens, it's like we feel bad, we feel like everything's going to come crumbling down, we don't feel comfortable, and a lot of times because of problems we're going to talk in a little bit, what happens is, instead of sticking with it and trying to fix it, we just go back to comfort, and go back to what we know, and just revert the changes, and in a lot of ways, deep down, we know that doing this will not work. However, doing this is very scary. And so, in a lot of ways, we just delay the decision. We say, you know what, I'll just deal with this in the future. Now I'm too busy anyway, it's not convenient. I'll wait, like we were saying with the turn. I'll wait when, the pavement's less wet and I'm going not as fast, and when the turn is more convenient. And we do that. The problem is that, as we've seen, that never happens. And what we're doing here is we're just delaying the inevitable. Eventually, again, we're going to be faced with this. We're going to be frustrated, overwhelmed, exhausted, and then we're like, ooh, I wish I would have started this process longer ago. I know these drawings are a bit ugly, but I hope they illustrate what I'm trying to say here. We pull back to comfort. And now, if you've been here, then you're really going to relate to this story that I'm going to tell you, and I'm even going to go here, because this is exactly what happened with me, and very well illustrated in this club, if you're a football fan, or soccer, if you're American, called Manchester United from the United Kingdom, one of the biggest teams in the world, probably top 5 most popular football, soccer teams in the world. And what happened was for, I roughly believe, I think it was 26 years, they had the same coach, Sir Alex Ferguson, and they were very, very successful. Won, I believe 11 Premier Leagues and Champions Leagues, and just overwhelmingly positive, to the point that he's likely the best manager of all time, for a lot of people at least. And what happened was, for these amount of years, it built a legacy, it built a culture of winning, of a certain standard that you have to adhere to. The problem is that, eventually, after these 26 years, this guy, I'm going to draw here, he just retired. So, that was it. And immediately after, and we are kind of in that period, 11 years after, they won none of those championships. Won a few things here and there, but the style of play they've been playing has always never been that good. It's always been bad. It's almost like a ship that is always about to sink, and then eventually sinks. Comes another person to kind of try to bring it up, but it never gives the impression that it's going to last, that they're really building a solid foundation, that they're really doing things correctly. And eventually, at some point, around 4 years ago, they brought in a manager that at the time was in Europe, very successful, almost went to the Champions League final, playing beautiful football with a team that was not that good, and that was, and I'm going to do here, Erik ten Hag for Ajax. I was going to try to draw the logo, but I can't, so I'm just going to do this. For Ajax in the Netherlands, and he was coaching that team. Now, they brought it in. There was a lot of hope that, because they played good football, that this was going to be a time to change. But what happened was, he came, so he goes from Ajax, he goes to Man United. And in the beginning, if I remember correctly, he tries to implement his style, which is different. And it's, obviously, when you do such drastic changes, we're seeing an example, results are going to go down. And, because it's difficult. You have to, the players, you got to get new players for that style. They have to train a certain way. Everything has to change. And so results, in the beginning, they go down. It's normal. But the problem is that brings a lot of pressure, especially for a club like this that is so big. Every sort of newspaper and whatnot immediately are like, oh, chaos in Manchester, drama, what's going on, are we going to fire, all of these things. And so it's a lot of pressure. And very few people can handle that pressure. And he couldn't, unfortunately. And so what he did is, instead of trying to play like he did here, what he did instead was he played not to lose. So he just kind of saw what he had and really set it in the best way to get the best results right away. But as we see here, and as we're going to see, what gets the best results right away very rarely is what's going to get the best results in the long term. The best decision would have been, if possible, to stick with Swift playing, to get the right players, to do things correctly. But at some point, because, and he even got a lot of the players that he asked for, but at some point, because too much pressure, difference, things that none of us really knows about, it didn't work. They started playing not to lose, and long story short, he was, as I'm going to write here, happens, but it happened to him. But it was very sad, because one of the biggest promises of European football and coaching was fired and playing in horrible football like that. It was horrible. You lost and you played terribly because you're just kind of here. But now, this is where I'm trying to get with this story, which is now they hired, let me see, I'm going to go here from Manchester United. They hired a new manager from my team. I'm going to write the name here. From my team in Portugal. It's the man that brought a team that hadn't won, I believe, in 19-20 years the championship, and they won not once but twice in 4 years. And I'm not going to say likely to win this year again, but they're very, very, what's the word in English? Very likely. It's not very likely, but sort of the thing. They're kind of the favorites to win it. And this is the same guy that they brought in. Now, the big difference between these two right here, is that this one is fully committed to his way. And you see it already, and the results are not good right now, and expected. But my call here is that they will be very good, and he will be the person to do what has to be done, because he has something that all the previous managers lacked, because he has the skills which some didn't have, but then he has something that, in this case, this lacked. And that is none other than one of the key factors we're going to be looking at here and how to develop that, and that is commitment. Now, as we're going to look here, and I'm going to go back to the beginning, one of the biggest problems, and I'm even going to draw a different thing, when you face, and I'm going to do here, an obstacle, when you face a wall, and you're trying your way and it's not working, and it to a certain extent you have to change the approach, as we've seen. The biggest thing, as we've seen, that it's going to prevent you from going all the way is a lack of commitment. It's having one foot in, one foot out, and you're, in a lot of ways, you're hoping to try, and as you try, your decision is validated by you got a result, or someone approved of it, or some external factor that will validate your decision. The problem is that these decisions are only going to be externally validated in the future. And then people are going to look and be like, oh, wow, that was so smart, and oh, that was, you needed to have a lot of resilience to do that, and blah, blah, blah. You know the drill. But no one will reward you in the beginning. No one will care, likely. Or if they do, it's going to be not a negative reaction, it'll be a less good reaction than this. Or it's going to be like, why don't you stick with it? It's going good. Why risk things? But if you're ambitious and you want to get to the next level, you have to risk things to a certain extent. Now, I'm not saying, when talking about commitment, that you should just look at the obstacle and let's say, I don't know, this was the first approach you found to go this way around. You shouldn't commit right away without thinking, without strategizing, without doing your research, without making sure that it aligns with you and what you're trying to do. That all has to be done. To rush into action just because would be very, very unwise, and likely you wouldn't even be able to stick with this decision. Because if you don't find the purpose in these tasks, and the goal itself could be a bigger conversation about that, if you don't see purpose in things, you're not going to stick with them. And that is very true in this micro sense, that if you don't see the true purpose of doing these actions and where they're going to take you, and that you recognize as well that in the beginning it's not as good, you're not going to stick with them. Because the same mind that today decides very motivated, oh, let's begin, tomorrow sees better results, says, let's go back to what we know. And so it's unreliable to just go based on the emotions you feel right away. You have to commit, but you have to do it strategically. You have to think about it, and you have to make sure that it is in an optimal way. It's a beautiful quote that I'm going to read here. Strategy without tactics is the slowest route to victory. Tactics without strategy is the noise before defeat. So please be careful, do it correctly, don't just jump into action. However, at some point after you do that, you have to jump in. Because when the goal is clear, the purpose behind it is strong, then the strategy and tactics leading to it are optimized, and reality quite literally will bend to your will. You may not believe it yet, but you will soon, especially if you stick with the right way of doing things. However, before it does, and before you are rewarded for your efforts, you will be tested by whether you believe in God or the universe or some other outside force. It will require you to test you to be like, are you really in or not? And usually the best test of it is that in the beginning, not the best but the most common, is that in the beginning you don't get the results you want, or you face an obstacle, or things are, don't go as smoothly as you expect. It's normal, you're being tested. Just like a surfer jumping into the ocean to go and surf, you have to get past the shore break before you get to surf. You have to commit to it, no matter how scary it may seem. Now, quoting here another quote, and from one of my favorite books and now movies, Dune, I must not fear. Fear is the mind killer. Fear is the little death that brings total obliteration. I will face my fear. I will permit it to pass over me and through me. And when it has gone past, I will turn the inner eye to see its path. Where the fear is gone, there will be nothing. Only I will remain. Now, unlike a surfer, that, let's say this is sort of the beach, and this is where the waves start, let's imagine. I'm very poorly drawn, oh my god. Let's imagine this surfer guy is going in here, and he has to get past one short break. You are going to have multiple ones where you're going to have to get past. Anyone that is an entrepreneur or does their own things knows that, the beginning, it's like you quit your job, you do your own thing, but after that, other levels will come and you will have to get over them. However, this is a trap that I was stuck in for a long time, is that you get past after the first one, you think that's it. And then you can just coast in, but that's not how it works, because then you get success, you get used to it, and then you realize, oh, I have to risk things again. I have to get to that next level, but now it's much, much harder to risk it. Now, for me, this first one, and kind of getting over that, was when I initially quit my job, my coffee shop job, to pursue paths of meaning full-time. And, in the beginning, after I kind of went through all those hurdles and started finding success, it was fantastic because you're all of a sudden going from a position where you hate your job and are living not even in your own place and everything's kind of not the best to now sorry there I'm making more money, it's a dollar sign, I'm having my own place, more freedom, more time, everything is going much better. In the beginning you're so excited by these things that it doesn't really, anything else doesn't really matter. But no matter how much these things are, eventually we get used to everything. No matter how high you go, if you stay there long enough, you get used to it. And the problem is, when you get used to it, you start realizing certain things are not so well. And I remember at the time we were doing mostly selling I'm going to try and draw here, merchandise and things like that with, with designs that we did. And it was cool in the beginning, but very quickly I realized that this is not what I wanted to do. Nothing wrong with that if someone, that's really where they find their purpose, doing designs and all that. But for me, it wasn't. In a lot of ways, I really wanted to be valued more, not by, these pictures and designs and by quotes from other people, but my own thoughts and my own ideas and my own development of those things and being able to help others with that. In a lot of ways, by what I had in here and not just what I was kind of researching and, sticking together. Sort of thing, so to speak. And so I, became aware of that. It became the point where I was like, I have to change. And so I decided to face the next short week. And I was like, all right, so the content now is going to be not so much just quotes from other people and all these things. I'm going to start writing my own things and putting my own sort of spin into it. But as it's tradition, by the universe, by God, you will be tested, and I was. And so when I tried first time, the first post I put was much, much lower the likes from what the other ones had. And I know that's a very vanity metric now, but when you're younger and you're just more starting out, these things affect you much more. And I remember seeing that and I was like, ooh, oh my God, I know I need to do this, but I don't know if I can. And then what if I just lose everything? And then essentially I just couldn't. And because I didn't plan correctly and strategize and really commit to it, the wave kind of just spit me out and brought me kind of right here where I was comfortable. It's kind of there surfing those waves, but not going to where I really wanted to go and to really get to the next level and then be able to then face the next level and really keep going. And above all, what kept me here, above everything, and what also prevented me from really strategizing correctly and committing was above all a fear of loss. Because when you're here in the beginning and you have nothing to lose or nothing that you really enjoy to lose, then and no responsibilities, anything like that, you're just like, I'm just going to risk it because what's the worst that can happen? Worst case, I just go back to where I am and I already am here, so it's not that bad. However, when you get here, or here when I was, and you already have things that you built with blood, sweat and tears and you've put effort and passion and all these things into, and you feel like you could lose them if you are to try and risk going to the next level, then it's different. And then you're scared. And then you realize that it's not that easy. And that's, I don't even know if I want to do it. I know I want, or I know I have to, but I don't really want to do it right now. And so I'm going to delay. I'm going to push back. And because I fear losing all these things, I'm not going to do it right now. Another problem, just a side note here as well, is that, when you're just, because the natural thing is to try to do more of what you were doing, sort of here to try and overcome it. Even though it's not that logical, that's what we end up trying to do. And we end up having, I'm going to do a clock here, less time, less energy, and overall we get more and more drained to the point where you think like, where am I even going to find the time to strategize the way to keep moving? How am I going to find the time? And I just want to briefly talk before I move forward about something called, I can do here, called the Parkinson's law. I look like I have a doctor's handwriting. Now, Parkinson's law is, and I'm kind of paraphrasing here, but it's something that states that work will take the amount of time that you allotted for it. And two examples here. This is why, for example, some people have 2 months to complete a project and they will delay, procrastinate for 1 month and 28 days, and then in the last 3 days they'll complete everything. And so it took 2 months, but it could have taken 3 days, even if it seemed impossible in the beginning. But so they allotted the whole 2 months for it. And this is also the same reason as an entrepreneur or someone that has more freedom over how you structure your day, why sometimes it can feel that you're working from, sunrise to pretty much the time you go to sleep, where you wake up, you check notifications right away, you're having lunch, replying to emails, You're always checking things. You're never off the clock because you never also limited yourself. Excuse me here. And an approach like this also can't work because then you're never going to have energy for anything, and you're always going to be drained, and it's not going to work. And so a very important thing here too is to realize that if we don't put limits on ourselves and what we're doing, then there's not going to be any limit, and you're always going to be overwhelmed, exhausted with the same amount of results. That's the more crazy part here, is that you're going to be working more, but a lot of times you're going to be delaying and overwhelmed and just trying to do a bunch of things at the same time, having the same results as if you just said, okay, I'm going to do 5 hours per day maximum, and whenever 4 p.m. arrives or whatever that time is, I just stop. What you realize if you do that is that, I can do everything and then I have much more free time. But that's just a side note here, because after all of that, the question still remains. First of all, how do I commit to the right path? And then second of all, very connected to it, how do I make sure that it is the right path? And I'm going to go very kind of broad view over this because, again, everyone is going to be different, how the details of it. However, the overall foundation of it and what works is essentially the same for everyone, as in the structure of it. First of all, the main thing that needs to be in place, and this is absolutely key, is to make sure that you have a goal that makes sense and is purposeful to you. Now, what I mean goal, I don't mean just make this amount of money or get to this point. It is get to that point, but how also you're going to get to that point? Because if you just say, like we've seen, get there by all means required, then you're going to use all means and you're going to exhaust yourself, and then it's going to, in the long term, making sure that you don't even get there. So it's much more important to say, I want to get there, and how am I going to get there? You have to establish the limits for yourself too. And then in a lot of ways, what we're doing here is taking this foundation of a purposeful goal that is clear, that has clearly defined boundaries, and then we're going to reverse engineer our way from the goal all the way to where you are today. And I'm going to open the iPad here once more. Just got to put the screen recording, and it's going to look something along these lines. We're going to go here. I'm going to put vertical now because it's a bit easier. You can go here to the side. So you start at the top with I'm going to put a purposeful goal, something, that's clear, that has its boundaries well defined. Boundaries well defined. An example of this, let's say, okay, my goal is to make, 50K per month, but then my boundary, perhaps I say, is like without taking sales call and working 5 hours per day maximum. Now you may say, but sometimes you have to work more, of course. But these are just things that are going to make sure that you don't go down a path that you don't want to go. Because worse than, in my opinion, than not being able to get to your goals is really creating a reality where you have gotten the physical things you wanted, but now you feel trapped. And now you feel like you're doing things that you hate to do, and it's almost like you've created a prison for yourself. It's trying to escape it, you have created it for yourself. That's not what we want. But with the goal, and what I always kind of preach is something along the lines of, first of all, we start here. And this is how you're going to identify the strategy. The tactics, the habits, then it's going to be up to you. But first of all, you want to identify what are the main areas of action of my goal that I have to optimize. This is going to sound very basic. You're going to start questioning, what's the point of this? But in organizing, it makes all the difference. So if it's a business goal, this is going to likely come down to, my marketing, which is going to involve the content, the ads, all those things. Likely it's going to be here, it could be the sales process too, the fulfillment. So it's going to be something along the lines of, I'm going to use more of my sort of things. So it's going to be the content, then the marketing, and then the fulfillment. Difference from content to marketing is that marketing would be more like, the call to actions, the campaigns, all that, and the content is like the writing that I do, the post for the page, all of these things. And I know that if I optimize these correctly, then I will get to my goal. Now, obviously, that's still very broad, but once you have these, it becomes much easier to understand, and you do this for each one of them. What are the habits within all of those that I want to do? And here I suggest you identify and not being too strict with what is important, what's not. It's kind of like writing, okay, what is kind of everything that I have to do? And once you have that, then you imagine I have some here. I'm going to put in lowercase to identify less priority. And then you'd be like, okay, I have all of these, but I don't need to do all of these. And some of these, I actually don't even need to do at all. But some I have to do, but I can delegate or I can automate. And then by organizing like this, it becomes much clearer. If you're just thinking off the top of your mind, you start your day and you're like, what am I going to do today? You're not going to be able to identify things like this. And so that's why it's so crucial to do it like this. Now, before we get into another important part of the habits, perhaps the most important that we're going to do here, I just want to show that another key step, something, it's the process I always do with my clients. I have to find a better tool to draw because these are so ugly. But these are going to be the pre-habit actions. So these are just going to be things that have to be set up so that you can do the habits correctly. For example, if I commit to writing every day and I'm going to like myself that that's a cornerstone of everything I do, for whether that's the newsletters, whether that's the videos, whether that's the posts, then I better make sure that, for example, my workspace is set up correctly to write, to make sure that all the distractions have been cleared away, to make sure that I set up as well the, the definition or the defining of what am I going to be writing about, when am I going to be publishing this, where, at which day, what platform am I going to be using, setting that up, all these things that you don't really notice, but then you notice at the worst times if you don't do it before. And it's like, oh, I'm going to send the newsletter. Oh, but the thing is not set up, the program, and these things are not set up, and now I have to do them. Now I'm overwhelmed. And if you don't do these, then it's going to start affecting the habits. And if the habits are affected, you don't fulfill the main area. And if that doesn't happen, you don't get to the goal. Very broadly, it's a process I work with my clients, so now I'm going to keep it more broad. Something very important to habits, though, and this is originally from Stephen Covey, or that's where I saw it from, and that's understanding the quadrants of tasks. So this is quadrant 1, 2, 3, and 4, I believe it's like this. Yeah, that's it. And so here is, so number 1 is important and urgent. Number 2 is important and not urgent. And then this is number 3, important and, or not important and urgent. And number 4 is not important and not urgent. So these things you don't really want to do because they're not important or urgent. So this is just like BS. Not important but urgent. These ones are things like phone calls that are absolutely no need, or meetings, or just replying to things that there's no point to it. It's just keeping you busy, and you also want to, as best as you can, remove these. Now, where most people spend most of their time is here, which is important and urgent. Now, these are things that you have to do them, but they're just the urgent things. Like, oh, I committed, let me think of something here. Oh, this meeting is coming up. It's urgent. I have to do it. That's already structured. Oh, this new project just landed on my desk. I have to do it. It's urgent. I have to do these things. It's things that really have a short deadline usually, or they require immediate attention, and we have to do them. And some of these things, it has to be us, and there's no way around it. However, I would argue that all progress is dependent on how well, and especially progress to overcome, where were we? The obstacles that we've seen here. You have to do the tasks here, which are important, extremely important, but they're not, it's an urgent. These are going to be things like strategizing. It's going to be things about like reviewing your efforts and seeing where you're going wrong. It's going to be things about like, learning, improving your skills. It's things that they never really feel urgent, and you kind of can delay on them forever because they're not impacting your current results in the sense that they're not taking away. However, if you never do them, you never get to the next level. And so we do as much as we can that we optimize this to do it as fast and as optimal as we can, so that then we can focus on these. And a lot of times doing these are going to make sure that we have less of these, because certain processes that we implement and certain things that we can automate and delegate, all of that, ensure that we have less of these. So these, I start removing some here, and then I have more time here. And the more I can do that, the more I start becoming valued, not just by the, amount of hours I exchange for that duration, but I begin being valued by my intelligence, by what's in my mind and how well I use my mind, and not just the amount of hours that I kind of throw at a problem. That is so key here. And if you can really take the time to do that, to not only identify but prioritize in your day and really clear time. For example, for me, I try to do everything before lunch so that after lunch, I just focus on these tasks. And that ensures that I fulfill these and I continually keep improving my process. And in a lot of ways, to finish, and I'm going to finish with that, what ends up happening is that we're going to go back to the beginning here. this obstacle here, instead of you just trying to throw more hours and more time and all that, you find a better solution for it. And for the same amount of time invested, a lot of times less time and effort invested, you get better results. Because what you essentially do is that you increase the value per unit of time that you invest. Value per unit of time. And the better you can do that, the better you go after your goals. And the more you focus on increasing that and not just so much throwing hours and effort at the problem directly, the more you're going to go up. But that requires, like we've seen, and I'm going to finish with that because I'm also almost out of battery, and I hope this doesn't go all the way, that you do the process correctly and that you commit to a right strategy and that you really, don't skip any steps.